happiest and most hopeful sound in the history of American music may well be the slowly ascending wail of a clarinet that begins George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. In the Disney visualization of the piece for Fantasia 2000, the husband and wife art director team of Eric and Sue Goldberg pictured that clarinet glissando as an introduction to New York City, a place where happiness can successfully be pursued. The visualization of Rhapsody in Blue is a moving catalog of 100 of the happiest things about New York, from Central Park to the skating rink at Rockefeller Center, co-expressed in the rhythm that is the common denominator of music and animation graphics. "It's about chasing your dreams," says Eric Goldberg. Susan elaborates, "The whole idea of our interpretation of Rhapsody in Blue is a day in New York and how the lives of the people there intertwine to help make their dreams come true." The Goldbergs have been dreaming about a short set to the quintessential New York music of George Gershwin and animated in the style of the master caricaturist Al Hirschfeld. Hirschfeld, who turned 96 on June 21, 1999, shared their dream. The Goldbergs approached him with their idea back in 1992 when he consulted on Eric's creation of the Genie in Aladdin.
What would you wish of me? Be ever impressive.
The won't contain
Often imitated,
but never duplicated. Genie of the lamp.
Hirschfeld said that while he was not up to the task of designing the characters for Rhapsody, he approved of Eric designing it in Hirschfeld's own highly caricatured, anti-literal style, where a nose need only be a V. Movement, too, would be caricatured. "Dig those jiggling subway riders!" It took the Goldbergs 8 years to make that dream come true, because first the Disney studio assigned Eric to co-direct the animated feature Pocahontas, and then to animate Philoctetes to the voice of Danny DeVito in Hercules.
Call me Phil.
And then, for Fantasia 2000, he was asked to visualize Carnival of the Animals. Finally, between features, he was given the green light to make Rhapsody in Blue as a short with an orchestra of studio musicians conducted by Oscar-nominated composer Bruce Broughton, known to the animation team for his score of The Rescuers Down Under, with Ralph Grierson as solo pianist. The solo clarinetist for the Disney recording of Rhapsody was Jim Cantor, whose father, the late Ben Cantor, once played the part on a 28-day tour with Gershwin and the Paul Whiteman Band. But rather than Rhapsody in Blue being released as a short, the producers of Fantasia 2000 expressed an interest in it as a potential segment for their film. The Goldbergs and their team, head of layout Rasul Azadani, head of backgrounds Natalie Franscioni-Karp, co-heads of cleanup Emily Giuliano, aka keeper of the Hirschfeld line, and Vera Pacheco-Lampfer, and head of effects Mauro Maressa, rushed furiously to complete the segment. Gershwin's rhythm gave the updated Fantasia something in Eric's words: uniquely American, modern, urban, and 20th century. Urban America is not an area upon which animation, and particularly Disney animation, often treads, said Eric. Mickey and the gang went from farm to suburbs. But my mom was from New York, and my dad was from Philly, and I lived in New York for a time. It seemed to me that in an urban environment, people affect one another in very profound ways, often without realizing it. As we are living shoulder to shoulder and cheek by jowl in this international petri dish, there is a real synergy. Working together, we increase each other's effectiveness. So the Goldbergs made a moving picture of New York synergy, 12.5 minutes of New Yorkers searching for happiness to the energetic rhythms of a big city. Duke the Riveter pursues happiness by giving up his stable career in construction to go for it as a jazz drummer in Harlem. Jobless Joe seeks happiness in gainful employment and finds it in the construction industry just as Duke is leaving an identical job. Rachel, a little girl whose busy parents leave her with a nanny too much, dreams of happiness, explained Sue, as quality time together with mom and dad. Her parents learn to treasure what they have when they almost lose her in big city traffic. And John embodies the spirit of New York in exhibiting the confident hope that we can find happiness by making our dreams come true. Visually, I always thought of the beginning of the segment as a line, says Eric, and you had to make it a line that ascends the same way that the note of the clarinet ascends and then resolves itself into the Manhattan skyline. When the city draws itself, says Susan, I gave it the kind of lavender purple you get in the morning, and as the line hits certain notes, the colors come up on the buildings. The colors flare up and then they settle down, and at the very end, the sun rises behind the buildings and you'll see the glow and you'll start traveling through the city. Gershwin marked the tempo of the opening molto moderato and used it to introduce the major rhythmic themes of the piece. The Goldbergs follow Gershwin's lead. The theme of Duke, for instance, combines orchestra, piano, and pencil lines to draw us the kind of guy who sleeps with his drumsticks, then uses the frenzied up-tempo as he shoots out of bed, brushes his teeth, and rushes off to his job. Eric Goldberg's caricature of George Gershwin is based on an Al Hirschfeld caricature of Gershwin drawn from life, but this caricature moves and plays the piano with impeccable technique. Goldberg learned from his musical advisor Kent Holliday how to make it look as if the animated Gershwin were making the sounds pianist Grierson is making on the soundtrack. I'm not a musician, admits Eric. I sat down with Kent and made sure which fingers were supposed to be hitting the white keys where, and which fingers the black, and animated the scene as accurate piano playing. Although it may sound like a rote exercise, Kent helped me marry the technical and emotional. First, I animated George Gershwin's mood, his pure body movements and head positions to the rhythm of the music he was playing. Then Kent and I made certain I was animating the arms and fingers correctly, so that instead of distracting the viewer, the movement helps support the emotion. And while Gershwin plays, the childlike John tries to play. This proves difficult as his wife, Killjoy Margaret, demands he pay the bills and carry the loot on her shopping excursion with her little dog Fufu. She drags him away from a kid's game of hopscotch he joins, but is too late to keep him from enjoying a little unscheduled levity with an organ grinder's monkey. This monkey business is animated by Andreas Deja, who worked memorably together with Eric when Andreas animated the wicked Jafar to Eric's Genie in Aladdin. Let it stand here as an illustration of the way Eric Goldberg directs. The scene calls for a monkey to steal some peanuts from a peanut vendor just as John, Margaret, and Fufu happen by.
Huh?
John, with a look of glee on his face, breaks away from Margaret and is happily imitating the monkey until Margaret realizes he has fallen back and yanks him into line. All the primary action is actually happening on the counterbeats, the melody between the beats, says Eric. So every time the monkey and John move, it's on the counterbeats. On the beats, steam comes out of the peanut wagon. Then there's a secondary piano run that's sort of going doo-loo-loo-loo. And that's what the monkey's doing. When Andreas was animating Mickey Mouse in The Prince and the Pauper, I saw that he was great at doing imitation scenes, Eric recalls. So basically, what I wanted when he was animating John was that John imitate the monkey playfully, and then gradually they get in sync. Now I have to admit my direction of Andreas was pretty loose. I just said, the man and the monkey need to look as if they're having the most fun in their lives. You might throw in a Charleston. Andreas not only threw in a Charleston, he has John put his hands on his wagging knees and then switch knees in mid-wag. But after screening Andreas' scene, Eric said, before John breaks into the Charleston, we gotta get one pose in here that just says sheer joy. Yay! To express all the characters' personalities with particular colors meantime, Sue Goldberg worked out a color script in which she says, I rated every blue ever. Jobless Joe, for instance, is ice blue-green. It's a cool blue with an aura of sadness because this is a guy who needs a job and can't find one. Little Rachel, on the other hand, is a bright color. She's actually a magenta. She's a pretty little girl who just wants to be happy with her parents, and they really love her, but they're caught up in trying to make ends meet in New York City. Mom has the same purple hair as Rachel, but she's wearing a mulberry coat that I and many of the women at the studio remember their own moms wearing. Dad is periwinkle. He's a warm color. Duke the Riveter, who wants to be a drummer, is purple, because purple has serious heart. And what Duke has most is heart. John is in black because that's the great design color, but his hair, glasses, mustache, and socks are red. I see red as a happy color, but the fact that he's in black and only his socks are red tells us, Eric interjects, tells us that it's a slightly surreptitious joie de vivre, where he has to hide his socks in his pants legs when Margaret and Fufu are around. Margaret, his wife, is grayed-down lavenders and blues, continues Sue, and Fufu, the miserable yappy little dog who looks like a caterpillar dragging a fur coat and gets all Margaret's misplaced affection, is colored peach. I think Margaret knew how to have fun when John married her, but her sense of fun has gotten grayed down too. Now Margaret believes that they have a position in society to uphold, and when John is acting like a kid, he's not supporting her idea of what their position requires. The celebrated slow section in Rhapsody in Blue is expressed in a sequence in which all the main characters daydream of the happiest things. And for John, it literally seems the same as having wings. I wanted to find a way to bring the entire story together, says Eric. Rockefeller Center's skating rink felt like exactly the right setting to reveal all our characters' hopes and dreams. Skating can be such a beautiful lyric activity, and all of the characters would look elegant and lyrical skating to the music. I began by having the two generic skaters dissolve into Rachel's mom and dad to show that her daydream is to have quality time with her folks. On skates, they throw her up in the air and catch her again. We animated Joe's daydream to the violin solo. He skates in a clean white shirt and polished shoes, and naturally he dreams of skating over to punch a time clock. It was Susan's idea that instead of a figure 8, Joe would skate a $sign into the ice to that violin. Duke, of course, dreams of drumming while he skates. And John dreams of taking flight. Sue Goldberg co-expressed the music and animation by giving the characters a flat, clear stage upon which to act out their dreams. The backgrounds become two colors, a pale blue-green for the ice, and a warm lavender for Rockefeller Center. The absence of shadows serves to focus the audience on what's happening to the characters. Then, when I add highlight colors, they appear more pronounced. For example, when Duke drums as he skates, we set it up to look as if he's skating in a warm yellow spotlight on a stage. That warm, pure yellow showcases the joy he takes in performing. Through the whole piece, I marked things with a bright color outside of the blue palette. There's a golden yellow alarm clock at the beginning, and there's the burst of butter yellow sunlight that breaks into the warm, dreamy lavender of Duke's room, which is even more demanding than the alarm clock. It really demands to be noticed. But as for backgrounds, we opted for having the color drop back. This allows the characters to come forward. For example, when John flies, we keep the background muted and far enough away that the attention is on the action. His streamlined shape doesn't require extra color to support the movement and its emotional value. In this case, the design and the animation carry the scene. Color can become so fiddly and piled on that you can actually lose the action. We didn't want the wipes, tones, mattes, and shadows to distract from the action in this segment. After all, Rhapsody in Blue is about cartooning. All John needs for liftoff, says Eric, is the slow saxophones and that big violin section. Add that to Eric's pencil and presto! Even though John was weight subject to gravity, continues Eric, it seems plausible when he takes flight because you see that he is already flying emotionally in his dream. Still, he seems to need a little trajectory, so we start him skating elegantly. He gets momentum on ice skates, goes faster and faster, goes into a little squat as skaters do before they leap, then takes a great leap into the air. Then he leaps out of frame, and when you hear the cymbals crash, John is in midair, coattails and red hair flapping, and a zillion pigeons scattering. The happiest animation is in the most decisive moments. John's daydream of flight makes him happy until he is handed Margaret's pet shop bill and knows he must quickly take charge of his life. New York's never-ending movement in the form of a construction hook will help. Meantime, Duke, up on the construction site, has to make a choice between his rivet gun and his drumsticks. On a downbeat, Duke throws away his rivet gun, which spirals down on descending notes into the hands of Joe. Joe catches the rivet gun and goes right on to the night shift. Rachel, meantime, struggling to avoid having Nanny put her coat on yet again to go to yet another lesson. She has already been to ballet, singing, swimming, art, gym, tennis, and piano, accidentally drops her red ball out the window to the busy Manhattan street and goes after it. Traffic screeches to a halt as her parents rush to her rescue. Lucky for Rachel, in animation, help is only moments away. Gershwin brought his Rhapsody to a conclusion with a great kinetic kick. The Goldbergs match it with John joining an actual kick line in a jazz club in Harlem. Duke is happy playing the drums in a Harlem band that is making a joyful noise. To that beat, Jolly John, free of Killjoy Margaret, is joyfully dancing with four Harlem showgirls. But the happiest part of the happy ending is Dad putting Rachel on his shoulders and Mom leaning in close in a medium shot of a happy family being happy all together against the lights of Times Square. Times Square is evoked with a color fest of kinetic neon patches. They become our last experience of how the art of music and the art of animation co-express New York City. Sue Goldberg gives us brightly colored patches that artist Marlon West of the effects department makes pulsate to Gershwin's pulsing rhythms. George Gershwin marked his final chord, FFZ, fortissimo sforzando, meaning very loud accented, and Eric Goldberg's accents it with his fade-out. As the final brash, exhilarating notes of Rhapsody in Blue die away, Goldberg points out, even though the final note is synced to the fade-out, it actually gives the piece a lift. You've gone through an entire day's journey, seen an entire city full of people, gotten emotionally involved with their problems, how to work well, how to love well, and then the fade out says, "This day's over," but that means that another day is just beginning.
Made you look.